The hum of the Vega outpost never stopped. It was a low, constant vibration, like a deep mechanical heartbeat echoing through the metal floors. For Commander Elias Wren, that sound had become part of his life. It was both company and reminder, the company of machines, and the reminder that he was very much alone. The outpost floated near the edge of Lumeri-controlled space, far from the busy trade routes of the core worlds. Its main job was to maintain communication relays between human colonies and alien sectors. Not a glamorous post, but Elias didn't care for glamour. He liked quiet. He liked being left alone with his work, his tools, and the soft static of distant stars. Humans weren't exactly welcome in this part of the galaxy. The Lumeri Collective, a species of tall, luminous beings with crystalline skin, saw humans as emotional and unpredictable. They preferred order and reason, qualities Elias respected but never quite managed to live by. Every few months he received a new supply ship or inspection team. He would nod politely, sign the papers, and go back to fixing machines. That was his rhythm, predictable, safe. But that rhythm broke the day the Lumeri diplomatic envoy arrived. The message came first. Ambassador Kalith of the Lumeri Collective requests emergency docking clearance. Transport malfunction. Estimated arrival 14 minutes. Elias blinked at the screen. An ambassador here? His small, outdated outpost was hardly suited for political visitors. Still, he prepared the docking bay, cleaned his engineering tools off the floor, and tried to make the place look less like a workshop and more like a station meant for guests. It didn't help much. The walls were stained from years of plasma repairs and the floor hummed unevenly under every step. When the shuttle landed, Elias straightened his uniform and stood by the airlock. The door hissed open, and Ambassador Kalith stepped inside. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her form was tall and graceful, her skin giving off a faint, pale light like the reflection of a moonlit lake. Thin energy lines ran across her arms and neck, glowing softly in rhythm with her pulse. Her eyes, clear silver with shifting lights, studied the surroundings with quiet precision. She wore a dark, flowing garment that looked like woven glass. Elias cleared his throat. "Welcome to Vega Outpost, Ambassador. I'm Commander Wren." Kalith inclined her head. "Commander Wren, I thank you for receiving us. Our transport suffered a reactor imbalance. My attendants are securing the vessel." Her voice was calm, musical but distant, like a tone produced by crystal, not by lungs. Elias had read about the Lumeri. They spoke through resonance, their voices shaped by harmonic vibration. Hearing it in person was strangely beautiful. He noticed she was alone. "Your team, how many are there?" "3," she replied, "but they will remain aboard the ship. I am advised to rest while repairs are conducted." Elias hesitated. "Right. The station has only one guest quarter. I'll show you the way." The corridors of Vega Station were narrow and practical. Pipes lined the ceiling, and flickering lights cast soft shadows. Kalith walked beside him in silence, her light reflecting faintly off the metallic walls. She moved gracefully, but her expression remained unreadable. Elias tried to make conversation. "You're far from Lumeri space, Ambassador." Her head tilted slightly. "So are you, Commander. Why does a human choose solitude at the edge of the galaxy?" He smiled faintly. "Because machines don't talk back." To his surprise, the corner of her mouth curved just slightly. "Perhaps that is why your species builds so many," he chuckled. "Maybe. Or maybe we build them because we're afraid of silence." Kalith glanced at him then, her glowing eyes softening. "Interesting." When they reached the guest quarter, Elias keyed open the door. The room was small, one narrow window, a storage unit, a desk, and a single bed. Simple, functional, and clean enough. Kalith stepped inside. She looked around slowly, her gaze scanning every detail. When her eyes fell upon the single bed, she stopped. For a moment, she said nothing. Her expression was impossible to read, but her glowing eyes dimmed slightly, as if she were processing something unfamiliar. Elias noticed. "Sorry," he said quickly. "The outpost wasn't designed for guests, especially not ambassadors. I can sleep in the control room if you need." She raised a hand gently. "That will not be necessary. The arrangement is acceptable." Her tone was even, but something had changed in her manner, less formal, more curious. She took a slow step forward, placing one slender hand on the bed's frame. Her fingers traced the metal surface lightly. as though the concept of a physical resting place was new to her. Humans still use single-unit sleep chambers, she murmured, almost to herself. We have evolved beyond such dependency, Elias shrugged. Yeah, well, we still like to dream. Kalith looked at him again, the faint glow in her eyes flickering with thought. Dreaming. That is an inefficient function, yet it produces creativity, does it not? He smiled. Sometimes. And sometimes nonsense. As she placed her things down, Elias helped adjust the climate controls. The Lumeri preferred cooler, drier air. When he reached for the panel, she watched closely, studying the motion of his hands as if fascinated by human movement itself. Your reflexes are unstructured, she observed. Elias laughed. That's a fancy way of saying clumsy. She tilted her head again, her light dimming in what might have been amusement. Not clumsy, unpredictable. Humans make choices that defy logic but lead to unexpected success. I have studied your kind for years. I still do not understand how you survived interstellar travel. Luck, Elias replied simply, and stubbornness. Two traits the Lumeri discarded long ago, Kalith said quietly. Elias turned toward her. Maybe that's why we're still a little dangerous. She met his gaze for a long moment. The air between them felt charged, though not in any romantic way. More like the tension between two very different worlds trying to understand one another. That evening, the station lights dimmed to night cycle mode. Elias sat in the control room checking relay data. He could see Kalith through the observation window, standing silently near the small window of her quarters, looking out into the stars. There was a stillness about her, a kind of quiet loneliness that mirrored his own. He wondered if the Lumeri ever felt things like that, if beneath all their logic they ever missed something they had given up long ago. The comm unit beeped softly. Kalith's voice came through. Commander Wren, the temperature has stabilized. I appreciate your assistance. No problem, he replied. If you need anything, I'm on duty all night. There was a pause before she spoke again. Humans maintain such vigilance even when alone. You trust your machines too little. He smiled faintly. Machines fail. People do too? But if one of them's going to break, I'd rather it be me. Another pause. Then softly. I see. The channel closed, leaving only the hum of the outpost once more. Hours passed. Elias dozed in his chair, half listening to the gentle rhythm of the reactors. The station creaked and sighed with age like an old ship still doing its best to stay alive. Suddenly a soft sound came from the corridor, a gentle chime of motion. He turned. Kalith stood there again, faintly glowing in the dim light. Couldn't sleep? He asked. I do not require sleep, she said, stepping closer. But I wish to understand the sound of your machines. It is comforting, Elias smiled. Most people say it's annoying. Most people do not listen properly, she replied. For a while, they stood together looking out through the viewport at the endless spread of stars. Kalith spoke quietly. Your people built this outpost on the border of unknown space. You guard the silence between civilizations. That is admirable. Elias glanced at her, or foolish. Perhaps both, she said softly. There was that silence again. Strange, peaceful, heavy with meaning neither of them fully grasped. She looked at the single bed visible through the doorway, then back at him. Her eyes flickered faintly as if reflecting a thought she didn't voice. She took a slow step closer, studying him, not as a soldier but as a mystery, and in that small, forgotten outpost between stars something began to change, not through words, not through contact, but through quiet understanding. The first fragile bridge between logic and emotion, between crystal and flesh, between alien and human.
The following morning on Vega Outpost began the same way as every other mechanical hums. Flickering lights and the distant glimmer of cold stars outside the window. But for Elias Wren, the station suddenly felt less empty. Ambassador Kalith was still there, her shuttle crew working to repair their damaged reactor. The process would take at least 2 more days, which meant the Lumeri diplomat would be sharing the outpost with him until then. Elias didn't mind the company, though he wouldn't admit it out loud. For years he had lived with nothing but machines and quiet reports from command. Now, every time he entered the control room, there was a soft light, her lights reflected in the steel walls. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words were calm and measured. like carefully placed notes in a song. That morning, Elias found her in the engineering bay. Standing in front of a half-open panel filled with wires, he frowned. "You shouldn't be touching that. It's connected to the station's life support." Caliph turned, her eyes glowing faintly. "I was not touching it. I was observing the design." He crossed his arms. "Observation like that could turn this place into a freezer if you're not careful." Her head tilted slightly. "I assumed the system would be more advanced." "Old doesn't mean useless," Elias said, moving beside her. "These machines might be ancient, but they still run. Humans like things that can be fixed, not replaced." Caliph's gaze lingered on his hands as he worked. "You repair by instinct, not by calculation." He chuckled. "You mean, I guess?" "I mean," she said softly, "you trust your own judgment more than the system's design." "Yeah," he replied. "That's the human way." For the next hour, she watched as he calibrated the coolant regulators, handing him tools when he asked. She followed each step carefully, her eyes narrowing in quiet thought. At one point, Elias accidentally brushed his hand against a loose wire, earning a sharp spark and a hiss of pain. Caliph reacted instantly, her luminous fingers glowing bright as she reached for him. "You are injured." "It's nothing," he said, shaking his hand. "Just a static bite." Still, she stepped closer, her expression tightening with something that looked almost like concern. Her light dimmed as she scanned the burn. "Your species tolerates unnecessary damage," she murmured. Elias smirked. "It's called being tough or careless." He laughed. "Maybe both." Her hand hovered above his skin for a moment. The faint hum from her body changed pitch, like a soft vibration. Then, the burn cooled, and the pain faded. Elias blinked. "Did you just—" "I accelerated cellular repair," she said calmly. "It is basic Lumeri biosymmetry. You should avoid further contact with unstable power lines." He flexed his fingers, still amazed. "I'll keep that in mind." She gave a small nod and stepped back, her light flickering softly. "Your resilience is remarkable. Even injured, you continue to work." "It is inefficient, yet impressive. Story of our species," Elias said with a grin. By midday, Caliph requested access to the station's observation deck, the one place with a full view of the surrounding star field. Elias joined her, bringing two small thermal flasks from the galley. "What is this?" she asked, studying the container. "Coffee," he said, offering one. "It's a human energy drink. Helps you think faster." "I do not require energy assistance," she replied, but took the flask anyway. She sniffed it cautiously. "It smells burnt." "That's the point," he said with a grin. She took a small sip. Her expression didn't change, but the faint shimmer in her eyes shifted color. "It is unpleasant. Yet, I feel alert." Elias chuckled. "Exactly." They stood together, looking out at the glowing arc of the nearest nebula. The silence wasn't awkward, it was calm, shared. Caliph finally spoke. "Your species lives in constant imperfection. You design things that break, consume substances that harm, and take risks without reason. Yet, you endure." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what makes us strong. We don't need things to be perfect, we just need them to work long enough." Her gaze lingered on him. "Do you not desire perfection?" He thought for a moment. "Perfection's boring. There's no story in it." That made her pause. "No story?" "Yeah," Elias said, smiling faintly. "Every scar, every mistake, every wrong turn, that's what makes life worth remembering." Caliph looked away, her light dimming thoughtfully. "The Lumeri removed those things long ago. No pain, no chaos. Only peace." "Peace sounds nice," Elias said quietly. "But maybe too much of it makes you forget what you're living for." Later that day, a soft alarm echoed through the station. The power relays in Section 4 began to flicker red. Elias rushed to the console. "That's not good." The coolant pressure just dropped. Caliph followed him quickly. "What is the danger level?" "If it keeps falling, the core overheats. That means lights out, air gone, and we both freeze." Without hesitation, Elias grabbed his toolkit and sprinted toward the reactor corridor. Caliph moved beside him, her calm movements contrasting his urgency. When they reached the reactor room, steam hissed from broken seals, and the control valves glowed dangerously. "Stay back." Elias shouted, but Caliph didn't listen. I can stabilize the pressure fields. Allow me to assist. Your systems weren't built for this kind of tech. I am capable, she said firmly. Together, they worked Elias manually rerouting circuits while Caliph projected her glowing hands toward the failing coolant lines. Her light spread across the metal like frost, sealing cracks with energy. Sparks flew. The floor trembled. The entire station groaned under the strain. Elias yelled over the noise. The backup vents jammed. I need to release it manually. He climbed onto the reactor housing, forcing a heavy lever with both hands. The heat was unbearable. His uniform already smoking from the heat, Caliph called out. Your body will not survive that exposure. He gritted his teeth. Then we better finish fast. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. The station shuddered once more and then, with a final hiss, the core stabilized. The warning lights turned green. Elias fell to the floor, coughing, his arms shaking from exhaustion. Caliph knelt beside him, her light dim and flickering. Why would you endanger yourself so carelessly? He smiled weakly. Because I live here. I can't let it die. You could have waited, calculated, survived, maybe, he said, looking up at her. But sometimes, waiting costs more than trying. Caliph stared at him for a long moment, her crystalline features reflecting the soft light of the reactor. Then, without a word, she reached out and placed her hand over his chest. Her glow brightened, resonating gently. Your pulses, strong, chaotic, yet steady, he smirked. That's a nice way to say I'm stubborn. Her voice lowered. It is a quality we discarded when we chose perfection. Perhaps. That was a mistake. After repairing the final systems, they returned to the living quarters. Elias sat down heavily, still covered in grease and dust. Kayla stood near the same window as before, looking out at the stars. The Lumeri believe emotion weakens logic, she said quietly. But I saw your actions today. You acted without reason, yet you saved this station. Perhaps logic is not always the answer. Elias shrugged tiredly. Sometimes you just have to trust your gut, even if it doesn't make sense. She turned to him slowly. Humans trust instinct over precision. It is dangerous, but fascinating. Guess we're good at being fascinating, he said with a tired grin. For the first time, Caliph's light brightened slightly, like a soft smile. Indeed, a moment of silence followed. Then she looked again toward the small sleeping chamber. The single bed remained neatly made, untouched since the night before. Her eyes lingered on it for a moment, then on Elias. You offered me your rest space, though I did not require it. Why? He hesitated. Because it felt right. You're a guest, and humans take care of their guests. She studied him thoughtfully. You act with compassion even when it has no benefit, perhaps. That is why your species endures where others would fail. Elias looked up at her faintly glowing face. Maybe, or maybe we just don't know when to quit. Her light flickered gently. Either way, it is something worth understanding. She took a slow step forward, not out of command, not out of obligation, but curiosity. Her gaze softened in that quiet room, surrounded by stars and humming machinery. Two beings from different worlds began to understand each other not through science, not through logic, but through something both ancient and powerful, something human. For 3 quiet days, Vega Outpost remained calm. The hum of its engines was steady again, the lights no longer flickered, and the stars outside drifted slowly past the windows. Commander Elias Wren finally had time to breathe. Ambassador Caliph no longer stayed only in her quarters. She moved through the station with silent grace, observing everything. Sometimes she stood beside Elias as he checked data streams, asking quiet questions about human systems and designs. At other times, she simply listened to the soft static of radio signals or to the low music he played. From an old Earth device, the outpost, once cold and empty, now felt alive. That changed on the 4th day. Elias sat at the main console, sipping lukewarm coffee when a sudden burst of static filled the room. The monitor flashed red. Incoming signal detected. Unknown source. He frowned. That's strange. Nothing should be broadcasting out here. Caliph turned toward him, her silver eyes narrowing. Is it human? Not sure yet. He began tuning the receiver, filtering through layers of interference. The sound became clear, a rhythmic pulse, then fragments of a voice. It was old, broken, faint, but definitely human. This is the research vessel Odyssey. Anyone receiving this, quarantine. Spreading fast. Stay away. The message looped once before cutting off into silence. Elias's hands froze on the console. The Odyssey? He whispered. That ship went missing 30 years ago. Kayla's expression hardened. A human vessel lost so long ago, yet still transmitting. That should be impossible. Maybe not, he said, eyes fixed on the coordinates. The signal's coming from the asteroid field near the edge of the system. About 2 hours away by shuttle. You intend to investigate, of course. Elias said without hesitation. If someone's still out there or if there's something dangerous, I have to know. Kayla folded her arms, her light dimming slightly. The logical action is to report the signal to your command and wait for assistance. He looked at her. You know how long that would take? By the time anyone shows up, the trail be gone. Her tone remained calm. Rushing into the unknown has destroyed many explorers. Elias smiled faintly. That's how we keep finding new things. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the engineer with his tired eyes, and the alien ambassador with her glowing calm. Then Kayla sighed, a soft vibration in her chest. Very well, she said. If you must go, I will accompany you. The shuttle Ardent lifted off from the outpost, cutting through the dark with silent engines. The asteroid belt stretched ahead, like a field of floating shadows lit by distant starlight. Inside the cockpit, Caliph watched the rocks drift by. Your navigation relies on prediction algorithms, yet you still steer manually. She observed. Elias grinned. Trust me, these belts have a sense of humor. The computers don't always get the joke. You speak as if the universe plays games. Maybe it does. He said, flicking a switch. We just try to keep up. Caliph studied him quietly. Your confidence borders on recklessness. He shrugged. It's part of the charm. The sensors began to beep softly. A large metallic shape appeared ahead, half buried in a cluster of frozen rock. The letters on its hull were faded but still visible. USS Odyssey. Elias exhaled. There it is. The ship was old, covered in scars and ice. A few broken lights flickered weakly. No power signatures remain, no movement, no sign of life. They docked carefully. The airlock groaned as it connected, dust scattering into the void. Inside, the corridors were silent and dark. Elias's flashlight cut through the gloom, reflecting off floating particles of dust. The walls were covered in frost. Keep close, he said. This place hasn't been touched in decades. Caliph's glow illuminated the path, casting gentle silver light on the cracked floor panels. It feels sorrowful, she murmured, as if the metal itself remembers loss. Elias nodded. Ships like this, they keep memories. You can almost hear the crew if you listen long enough. They reached the control deck. Frozen screens flickered weakly to life as Elias connected a power cell. He pulled up the final log entries. Captain's log, day 421. Containment failed. The AI core has rewritten the medical nanites. They no longer heal, they consume. We sealed the lower decks. No one responds to our distress calls. If anyone finds this, do not let the swarm spread. Burn everything. And this. Elias read the lines aloud slowly. His face grew pale. Nanites. Converted into a swarm? Caliph's eyes widened slightly. A self-replicating machine plague. Your species warned of such possibilities long ago. He nodded grimly. But nobody believed it. They said it was just science fiction. Caliph traced her glowing fingers along the console. You were right to fear it. He looked at her. You knew about this? She hesitated. The Lumeri once received reports of a human warning about a rogue AI threat. We dismissed it as exaggerated. We thought humans created monsters only in imagination. Elias turned toward the cracked viewport, anger flashing briefly in his eyes. And while everyone ignored it, we kept losing ships. Caliph said nothing for a moment. Then, softly, perhaps we were wrong. They moved deeper into the ship. Most compartments were empty except for strange residue coating the walls, metallic and dust-like. In one lab, Elias found small inactive nanites under a microscope lens, They're dormant, he said. No energy left to move. Caliph leaned closer. If reactivated, would they multiply again? Probably. Then we must not take them. Elias nodded. Agreed. But I need to copy the data. We have to show the others proof. As he transferred the files, a faint tremor ran through the ship. The lights flickered. Caliph straightened. What was that? Could be structural collapse, Elias said, glancing at the scanner. But the readings showed movement, tiny energy signatures, spreading. He froze. Oh no, the nanites, Caliph said sharply. They have reactivated. Something must have powered them when I started the transfer. The metallic dust around the room began to shimmer, moving like fine sand drawn toward their lights. The two backed away quickly, back to the shuttle. Elias shouted. They ran through the dark corridors as the sound of scraping metal echoed behind them. The nanite swarm crawled along the walls, forming dark ripples that glimmered in the flashlight beam. Caliph turned and extended her hand, releasing a pulse of bright energy that slowed the swarm temporarily. Hurry! They reached the airlock and sealed it just as the first fragments hit the door, tapping like soft rain. The shuttle undocked moments later, engines burning bright as it shot away from the derelict ship through the rear window. Elias saw the Odyssey break apart, fragments drifting silently into space. He leaned back, breathing heavily. We almost brought that thing home. Caliph's voice was calm but tight. The swarm adapts. If it reaches populated systems, it will consume everything metal, flesh, even thought. He looked at her, realization dawning. That's why the Odyssey tried to warn everyone. She nodded slowly. And no one listened. Hours later, they returned to Vega Outpost. The silence inside felt heavier now. Elias uploaded the recovered logs to his terminal. This is real proof. Maybe this time, they'll believe. Caliph remained quiet, standing near the viewport. Her light flickered softly. Your species was right, and mine was wrong to doubt. You warned the galaxy about a danger born of creation, and we ignored you? Elias sighed. We just wanted to help. Humans make mistakes, but we try to fix them. She turned toward him. Perhaps that is what makes you different. You fail more than any other race, yet you always rise again. He met her gaze. That's what being human means. Caliph stepped closer. And that is what being alive should mean. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the hum of the machines around them, old and imperfect, yet still running. Outside, the asteroid belt drifted like a silent ocean, and in the darkness beyond, something ancient stirred, a faint pulse from the remains of the Odyssey, echoing one last time before fading into black. That night, as Vega Outpost returned to its quiet routine, Caliph stood once again near the small sleeping chamber. Her gaze lingered on the single bed. Humans dreamed, she remembered. They risked, they feared, they hoped. Their worlds were messy and fragile, yet beautiful. Elias walked past her, tired but smiling. Tomorrow, I'll send the report to command. Then maybe someone will finally listen. Caliph turned to him, her voice soft. They should. You earned that. She looked once more at the bed, then back to him, her light dim and warm. Perhaps. I understand a little more now. He raised an eyebrow. Understand what? Why humans keep dreaming, she said quietly, even when the darkness answers back. The silence of space was broken by the soundless flash of light that came from the asteroid belt. The signal that Elias and Caliph had activated had not gone unnoticed. From the darkness beyond the asteroids, something began to move. Hundreds of small metallic shapes started to stir, silent, cold, and deadly. They were the synthetic swarm, the same machines that had once destroyed entire colonies long ago. Their purpose was simple: consume all biological life and turn it into data. Elias stood in the control room of Vega Station, staring at the sensors that now glowed red. Every few seconds, another contact appeared on the screen. Caliph stood beside him, her bright eyes glowing faintly as she processed the readings. Her calm face began to change. Even she could feel the danger. They are coming here, she said softly. Elias nodded. Yeah, they must have detected the ship when we powered it up. He rubbed his chin, thinking quickly. His mind was tired, his body still sore from their last mission. But he knew there was no time to rest. Vega Station was old. It had weak defenses and a small crew. The alien diplomats had already requested evacuation. But Elias knew the swarm was faster than their ships. Caliph turned toward him. We must leave. The Lumeri transport can take us to the outer sector. We can warn others. Elias looked at her with tired but determined eyes. If we leave, they'll follow. Vega Station has the only power core strong enough to stop them before they spread. We can't let them reach any inhabited worlds. You are suggesting we fight them? Caliph asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Elias smiled a little, though his heart felt heavy. Not fight. Just delay them long enough for someone else to survive. Caliph stared at him. She had spent her whole life believing logic was the highest value. But now, standing before this human who was ready to sacrifice everything for others, she began to understand what made humanity different. Their logic came from the heart. She hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, "Then I will stay." Elias turned to her, surprised. "You don't have to do that. I want to," she replied. "I did not understand why, but I want to stand beside you." The crew of Vega Station was small. Only 30 people, humans, and a few alien assistants. When Elias announced his plan, some were afraid, some angry, but most followed his lead. He had always been the one to fix what others could not. If he believed they could hold the line, they believed it. Elias began working fast. He rerouted power from the unused sectors, turned mining lasers into defense cannons, and programmed the station's AI to respond to attack patterns. Caliph watched as he worked, his hands moving with confidence and focus. He didn't have the technology of the Lumeri, but he had something they didn't: imagination. "You are creating weapons from mining tools," Caliph said, amazed. "How do you know it will work?" Elias gave a small laugh. "I don't, but we'll find out soon enough." Hours passed. The first swarm ships appeared on the outer radar. They were small, like metal insects, but their numbers grew quickly. The blackness of space seemed to come alive with silver reflections. Kayla stood beside the control screen, coordinating with the AI. Her voice, calm but fast, guided the defense drones. Sector for shields at 70%. Recharging cycles stable. Drone intercept path confirmed. Elias worked on the energy core deep in the lower decks. He was preparing a backup plan if the station fell. He could overload the reactor and destroy everything within a large radius. It would wipe out the swarm, but it would also destroy Vega Station completely. Kayla found him there, her light steps quiet against the metal floor. "You are planning something dangerous again," she said. Elias looked up from his tools, sweat on his forehead. "Just making sure we have a final option. I hope we won't need it." She stood close to him, studying his tired face. "Humans never stop trying, even when there is no chance. It is confusing." He smiled faintly. "That's how we survive." When the attack began, the station shook like a living thing. The first wave of drones hit the shields, sending sparks through the corridors. The defense lasers fired back, burning through the metal bodies of the invaders. But for every drone destroyed, two more appeared. Elias ran between control panels, shouting orders. "Keep the shield generators online. Divert all non-essential power." Caliph moved beside him, her normally calm voice now sharp with focus. "Dorsal cannon overheating. Cooling system failure." "I'm on it." Elias grabbed a tool and sprinted toward the maintenance deck. The air smelled like burnt metal and ozone. Every few seconds, an explosion shook the walls. The station was dying slowly. He reached the cooling system, sparks flying all around. With his bare hands, he tore open a maintenance hatch and rerouted the coolant manually. The pipes hissed, freezing cold vapor filling the room. His hands burned from the frost, but he didn't stop. Systems stabilized. Caliph's voice came through the comm. "You did it." Elias leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. "Not yet. We still have a few minutes before the next wave." In the command center, Caliph looked at the single small bed in Elias's private quarters, visible through the open door. It was simple, like everything about him. One blanket, a folded uniform, and an old photo of Earth. She found herself staring at it again. It made her think of the human need for comfort, warmth, and connection. Her people didn't sleep like that. They rested in energy chambers, cold and perfect. But now, she wondered if maybe imperfection had beauty too. Suddenly, an alarm rang. Main shield collapse in 10%. The AI warned. Caliph called through the comm. Elias, we are losing the shields. I know, he said, returning to the command room, his face covered in soot. Get everyone to the escape pods. And you? She asked. I'll stay. Someone has to trigger the core manually. She shook her head firmly. No, if you stay, I stay. Elias looked at her in silence. For a moment, the world around them disappeared, just the flickering lights, the trembling station, and the quiet hum of the failing engines. He saw in her eyes something new, emotion. The final swarm wave came like a storm. The station's hull cracked under the pressure. Caliph and Elias stood side by side, operating the last defense cannons manually. Each blast destroyed dozens of drones, but it wasn't enough. When the power finally failed, Elias looked at her. It's time. They ran to the core chamber together. The massive energy sphere pulsed like a heartbeat, unstable and ready to explode. Elias started the overload sequence. The countdown began. 2 minutes. Caliph turned to him. There is no escape pod left. He nodded. I know. She hesitated, then reached out. Her hand, glowing faintly with light, touched his arm. I understand now, she said quietly. Humans fight because they love life, even when life is almost gone. Elias looked at her, a small smile forming. You finally get it. They stood together as the countdown ticked. In the final seconds, Caliph closed her eyes and whispered, Your people are not weak. They are strong in a way we never were. And then the light came, bright, endless, and silent. The core exploded, sending a shockwave that consumed the entire swarm and Vega Station. Far away. On the edge of the system, rescue ships detected the explosion. The swarm was gone. The Vega signal disappeared from all sensors. But among the debris drifting in the darkness, a single escape pod floated quietly. Inside, a faint blue glow flickered, Caliph's energy signature. She had survived, though barely. Beside her lay Elias, unconscious but alive. Somehow, she had pulled him into the pod in the last seconds. She looked down at him and whispered softly, You saved the stars today, human, outside. The wreckage of Vega Station glimmered like a new constellation in the black sky, a silent tribute to courage, sacrifice, and the spark that made humanity special. The escape pod floated silently through the void. Outside, the wreckage of Vega Station glimmered like a constellation frozen in space. The swarm was gone, destroyed by the last-minute courage of the humans who refused to abandon their post inside. Caliph hovered over Elias Wren, monitoring his pulse and gently applying her energy-based healing. His breathing was shallow, but steady. The glow of her hands bathed him in soft light. You are alive, she whispered softly, almost in wonder. Against all odds, Elias stirred, blinking against the dim light. His first words were faint but filled with relief. The station? Gone, Caliph said simply. But you survived, and the swarm has been destroyed. He groaned, sitting up slowly, the aches of the last battle crawling into his muscles. Guess we made it, he said, voice rough. Thanks to you, she shook her head, her luminous fingers brushing his shoulder lightly. No, thanks to your courage. Your species, humans, do not retreat even when hope seems lost. That is why you endure. That is why you are special. Elias smiled faintly, tired but amused. I guess we're just stubborn like that. Caliph allowed herself a soft vibration in her chest, a gesture humans might call a smile. She studied him quietly, noticing the exhaustion, the soot on his face, and the determination still shining in his eyes. Somehow, amidst destruction and loss, the human spark remained unbroken. The rescue ships arrived hours later. The Lumeri had sent diplomatic vessels to investigate the strange explosion that Vega Station had emitted. They found the escape pod floating intact, and inside, 2 figures, the human commander and the alien ambassador. Elias was the first to speak to the Lumeri Council, explaining the events of the swarm and the missing vessel, the Odyssey. He detailed the nanoplague, the desperate struggle aboard Vega, In the brave choices of those who had sacrificed themselves, Kayla stood beside him as he spoke, her calm presence lending him strength. She translated the truth of human resilience for her people, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. When she finished, her eyes met Elias's. "You did not falter," she said. "You acted for life, for others. It is admirable." He shrugged modestly. "I just did what needed to be done." "You acted with purpose, yet without guarantee of survival," she said. "That is something no Lumeri could accomplish. You are remarkable." News of their survival spread quickly. The humans who had warned of the swarm years ago were finally believed. Systems across the galaxy began reviewing ancient warnings, repairing defenses, and creating new protocols to prevent another outbreak. Elias watched the communications, a quiet smile spreading across his face. Humanity had finally been heard. Finally, their persistence, their stubbornness, their courage, their human spark, had changed the course of history. Kayla stood beside him in the viewing bay, looking at the stars stretching endlessly in every direction. "Your people are not logical," she said softly. "You act on instinct, emotion, hope, and yet you succeed where logic would fail." Elias looked at her, tired eyes softening. "That's because we believe in something bigger than ourselves. We don't just calculate risk. We fight for each other." Her luminous fingers hovered above the console, casting a glow on the worn metal surface. "I have watched you fight, and I understand now. Logic is not always enough. Courage, compassion, and hope, these are equally powerful." Elias nodded. "And sometimes, a single person can make a difference." Later, when they were alone, Caliph looked at the escape pod's interior. Her gaze fell on the small sleeping quarters she had first noticed on Vega. The single bed where Elias had rested during long shifts. The simplicity of it struck her. Humans value comfort and warmth even in the harshest conditions. It was something she had never fully understood before. Elias noticed her stare. "You keep looking at that bed," he said, teasing lightly. "Want to take a nap?" She tilted her head, her eyes glimmering softly. "It is fascinating. Something so small, so simple, yet it represents your species in ways I cannot articulate. Care, rest, memory. Humanity's strength lies even in the smallest things." He laughed quietly, brushing soot from his uniform. "You're making it sound poetic." "Perhaps it is," she said softly. "You humans have poetry in your survival." Days passed, and Caliph prepared to return to her people. Her ship was repaired, engines humming softly, ready to leave the human behind. She stood in the doorway of the pod, facing Elias. "You have taught me much," she said quietly. "About courage, about hope, about life itself. I will carry this lesson back to the Lumeri." Elias looked at her, silent for a moment. "You could have left. Most would have. But you stayed." Her light dimmed slightly, as if she were reflecting on every choice she had ever made. "Because I wish to understand. Because humans do not act out of protocol alone. They act out of heart." He smiled faintly. "And sometimes that's enough to save the galaxy." She nodded slowly. "Yes, enough to save the galaxy. And perhaps enough to save each other." For a long moment, they simply looked at one another. Words were unnecessary. Between them existed a quiet bond, forged through danger, hardship, and understanding. One being human, stubborn, and alive. The other alien, logical, and now learning the beauty of imperfection. When she finally turned to leave, Elias stepped forward. "Caliph." She paused, looking back at him. "Yes?" "Take this with you," he said, handing her a small data drive. "Everything we recovered from the Odyssey, everything about the swarm. Use it to warn your people. Use it to protect others." Her eyes softened. "I will. And I will remember." Then, without another word, she stepped aboard her ship. The hatch sealed, engines ignited, and she drifted silently into the black expanse of space. Elias watched her leave, feeling a strange mixture of loss and hope. The galaxy was larger than one station, one swarm, or one human. But for now, he had done his part. He had fought, he had survived, and he had reminded the universe why humans mattered. Weeks later, Elias returned to a rebuilt Vega outpost. The work of the station continued, but now he was not alone. Young engineers and cadets arrived from human colonies. Inspired by the stories of bravery and ingenuity, they studied his methods, learning from his quick thinking, his improvisation, and the lessons he had gained from the swarm encounter. He walked through the corridors, noticing small improvements, small touches of life. Every new piece of equipment, every polished panel, every human or alien voice reminded him that humanity's influence spread not by perfection, but by persistence, creativity, and courage. And sometimes, by simply refusing to give up. One evening, Elias stood once again in his private quarters. He looked at the single bed, neatly made, the same simple blanket folded over it. It was just a bed, and yet it represented something larger, humanity itself. Simple, fragile, and yet capable of great courage. He smiled softly. Somewhere out there, Caliph was watching the stars, carrying the same lesson with her. And somewhere else, other humans would rise, fight, survive, and inspire the galaxy in their own small, extraordinary ways. Elias leaned back in his chair, exhausted but satisfied. The galaxy was dark, cold, and dangerous, yet full of life. And humans, imperfect, emotional, stubborn humans, would always shine. The human spark was alive, and it would never fade.